Hello everyone, I'm on Fitzroy Square in London, and behind me is the house where Virginia Woolf lived for a few years, the celebrated authoress. Now, you might see above that blue plaque, that grey-brown plaque about George Bernard Shaw, who also lived in the same house, but not at the same time. I don't propose to talk about Shaw this time. I've done one about outside his house in London and his birthplace in Dublin. So we'll just concentrate on Virginia Woolf, and again I won't say a huge amount about her either, since I've already done her at her birthplace. So anyway, Virginia Woolf was born in 1882. She's originally Virginia Stephen, so her surname was Stephen, and she's from a wealthy family on both sides. Her parents were both on their second marriage, and so she was the progeny of the second marriage, and both of them had children from their first marriages. I think they've both been widowed because this is the 19th century, and the Victorian era divorce was vanishingly rare. It was a very lengthy, pricey and humiliating legal procedure, and they had to have very strong evidence of adultery and so on. It was regarded as a disgrace both for the sinned against and the sinning. Anyway, so she's very close to her brother Toby. He spelled Toby T-H-O-B-Y, so they're a very intellectual family. Her father, Sir Leslie Stephen, was a noted literary critic. So they grew up in Hyde Park Gate, London, which is also where Churchill died, on that same street. Anyway, so they're wealthy and privileged, and her brothers mostly went to public schools and indeed to Cambridge University. So she was very good friends with her brother's confrère. And she went to King's College London, the ladies' department. So the female undergraduates had a separate section of King's, because they couldn't possibly mix with the male undergraduates, because that could lead to impropriety at the time. And so university education was still quite a new thing. And in her time, only about 2% of young people went to university. In case of young women, it was well under 1% went to university. So she was far, far above average in the level of education she received. They'd often gone on holiday to Cornwall in her childhood, and then anyway, so she got married to a Mr. Woolf. Oh, I should point out, she was also the cousin of J.K. Stephen. J.K. Stephen, who had been the tutor of Prince Eddie. Prince Eddie was Queen Victoria's eldest grandson. Prince Eddie, his real name was actually Albert Victor, was the same position as Prince William now, as in the grandson of the reigning monarch, and he was in line to become king himself. So her cousin tutored that guy. Her cousin, James Kenneth Stephen, had been to Eton, King's College, Cambridge, was a stellar intellectual, due for a glittering career, but died at about the age of 30 of mania, and I can't remember what else, at St Andrew's Hospital in Northampton. And some people suspect him of being being Jack the Ripper, which has actually been comprehensively debunked. He was a minor poet. You could read his volume of verse, Lapsus Calami, and other verses, as in a slip of the pen. That's what Lapsus Calami means. It was a very well-known Latin expression at the time. So back to Virginia Woolf. So she began publishing novels, and she's part of the modernist movement, which was very modern at the time. Now we're all postmodernist, where the characterization of the themes matter more than the plot, and there can be very lengthy conversations, and try to be a bit more realistic, reflect the noise and the confusion of life, and not be too stilted, and not bear your erudition too heavily by working in the classical references, which they felt was something which rang rather false. Anyway, so she set up a publishing house. She moved to Twickenham, further west in London. She never had any children, so she was wealthy, she's privileged. She's part of the Bloomsbury set. Bloomsbury Square is not too far from here. We're in Fitzroy Square, which is from the beginning of the 19th century, as in after, I can't remember who it is, that one of the dukes has got the surname Fitzroy, as in illegitimate son of the king. So she committed suicide in 1941. I can't remember how. Was it with the gas from her cooking oven? She'd been plagued by mental ill health all her life. She'd been quite affected by the death of her favourite brother Toby earlier on. She was bisexual. She wasn't that into politics, but she was broadly left-wing in her sympathies, a feminist, a socialist, and so on, but not actually active in that way. So that's just a little bit about Virginia Woolf. She knew George Bernard Shaw very well, and anyone who was anyone in literary London. That's enough about Virginia Woolf. Toodaloo.